for those of you guys that don't know me, my name is Cole. I am usually you see me up here singing and worshiping and stuff. I'm the young adults worship director. I'm also the junior high director here, for those of you that don't know. So I'm super excited to get to talk with you guys today. Today, I want to tell you a story. I want to open with a story, and it's a story that's near and dear to my heart. I think a lot of us have gone through this before. Probably not very many of you, but a lot of us have gone through it before. How many of you guys have been on road trips? Yeah? Long car rides? Couple of us, a few of us. Okay, so with road trips, usually when I have gone on the one road trip that I've gone on, I went with a few of my friends and we switched driving back and forth, right? So first day that I go, right, we're driving to national parks. Me and a couple of my friends, shout out Zach, are going to these national parks and we're driving around. And my first day, right, it's a Sunday we started driving. We stayed in the Trump Hotel. It was super awesome. And the second day, it's a Monday morning. It's just a great start to my week. I'm the guy who has to drive out of Las Vegas, right? And so we start driving through Utah on the I-15, right? If any of you guys haven't driven on the I-15, it's really straight and it's really flat and there's not a lot to look at. It's pretty boring, especially when your friends fall asleep and, the conversation dies after like 4 hours. And so it's just like, I'm just driving straight. I'm seeing a lot of plateaus. I'm seeing a lot of like weird birds on the side of the road that you don't see in California. And so, the speed limit's 80 miles an hour. Let's say that I went a little bit faster than that because after about 2 hours, I saw some lights in my rearview mirror, and I got pulled over. First $250 ticket. Thank you. Yeah, that's okay. Hold the applause. It's okay. So first, second day of the trip, right? Off the bat, like that is my first experience in the car with my friends, right? And so I'm psyching myself out. I'm like, I'm questioning my ability to drive under the speed limit especially. And so I get back on the road. The sanity of my friends is in question because they let me get back behind the wheel after I did that. And we start driving again, right? And so I'm driving and I'm so focused on like my speedometer and I'm looking at the road and I'm like locked on. I'm 10 and 2 all the way. Normally I'm like a knee driver, maybe a pinky. Like, no, I'm locked into the road right now. I'm trying to like hurl insults back at my friends that are like, insulting me and like being funny and trying to goof around and like make fun of me for what I did. Because obviously that's what that deserves. I would do the same thing. So I'm so locked in on this, just driving straight, driving under the speed limit. And so I'm accelerating and I'm keeping it under the 80 mile per hour limit. And all of a sudden, my acceleration just disappears, and I'm like, that's great. Zach's car's breaking down. This is awesome. This is super sweet. So I'm accelerating, and it's not working. It's not working. I look over at Zach, and he like looks back at me, and he's like, I don't know what's going on. And I start to pull over, and I'm like, what is going on? I was so focused on not driving too fast that I ran the car out of gas 30 minutes after I got pulled over. I was expecting more laughs there, but that's fine. So, pedal to the metal, I look down completely out of gas, right? Head on the steering wheel. Like, Monday morning could not have gone worse for me. Like, that is the Monday of all Mondays, in my opinion. And so, of course, we're in the middle of nowhere. We're 3 miles from the closest gas station. We're calling AAA. I'm like, Zach, I am so sorry. And I'm just getting flamed viciously for the rest of the trip. I don't think I drove behind the wheel one more time without getting, insulted for, doing that thing. But of course, as they should, right? This was not a fun experience for me at all. And I was so distracted, I was so thrown off by all of the things that were rolling around in my brain that I wasn't focusing on the one imperative thing that I needed in order to drive a car. Newsflash, you need gas to drive a car, okay? Apparently I didn't remember that. So I'm sure, I hope none of you have gone through this, but in the case that you guys have ever run your car out of gas on the side of the road, it's not fun. In the case that you've run your car into the gas station almost on E, it's not fun. It's not great, right? But I think that it's a relatable experience that hopefully some of you guys have experienced. I hope that I'm not the only silly one that has ever done that. But when we look at our lives as Christians, I wanted to look at tonight, like what are the things that we do that we run our lives out of gas? What are the things in our lives when we are going and going and going? We're so focused on so many things around us that a part of us runs out of gas. What are those things for us? And so, like something that I think of off the bat, I think of something like losing a loved one. Something that is super hard, and spiritually, that is such a low that we can get to. We lose somebody that we really care about, that we really love. Somebody that maybe was taken for good reasons. Maybe there was a reason for it. Maybe there wasn't. But sometimes that can take a spiritual hit on us, and we can look at our lives and go, God, why are you doing this? Why is this? Why am I feeling like this right now? And that can really take a hit on our spiritual lives. I also think of like losing a spiritual leader or somebody that you look up to in your life, somebody that has been around, and maybe they go to a different church, and maybe they move to a different state. Maybe they fall away from the faith. Maybe something happens to where that person that was so pivotal in your Christian walk is now no longer there. Those are things in our lives where we can get to those lows. It's not always physically running out of gas, but we can get to those lows. And I think that these are examples of things that can happen at any time to a believer, and it can easily make us doubt. It can easily make us be frustrated with God. It can easily make us have so much hatred in our hearts and so much feelings in our hearts that just aren't meant to be there. And so in talking about these like spiritual gas tanks, I wanted to talk to you guys about the importance of what it means to be filled up. Right? Because I think as Christians and I think as people that live in the church and go to church all the time, it's so easy to pour, to give, and we don't remember what it feels like to feed ourselves for once. Because in order to give and give and give, we need to be able to be whole here. We need to be able to be full here, right? And you might be asking yourself like, oh yeah, like fill me up and like pour out and all this other kind of stuff. Like I understand that, and I know me, like the first couple times I heard that in a church, I was like, that makes sense, but like what does that really mean? And so I really want to make it simple, and I want to like explain what we get to do, right? And so as Christians, we have this life. We have a life of servanthood. We have a life where we get this glory-filled opportunity and duty to serve people, to serve ministries, to serve our churches, right? It is our purpose. It is our joy to do so. And we get to fulfill that with our purpose and with the purpose that God gives us while we live on earth. And it's really awesome. This picture of filling up and pouring out just reminds me so much of like the first thing I think of physically is like a cup. I'm sure most of you guys think of like filling up a cup with water, right? And so that cup has a capacity to hold things. That cup has a capacity to hold liquids and then to pour out liquids as well, right? And so in this picture, like I wanted to ask you guys a question. It's like, can a cup without water fill up another cup with water? There's a simple answer here. No. Good job. You guys are so smart. The clear answer is no, right? The reason that this picture is there to depict a life of faith is because a person who has not been filled up, a person who is not focusing on filling themselves up, that doesn't have a priority to fill themselves up with the pursuits, with the qualities, with the lessons, with the heart posture of God, with the heart posture of our Savior, if you are not filling yourself with those things, you can't continue to pour out into those other people, because eventually that pouring becomes purposeless. Eventually that pouring no longer has a reason to be there. You can't fill somebody up with something that you don't have. An empty cup with no water cannot pour water. So if we are not practicing those same things that we're preaching, if we're not doing the same things that we're trying to pour out on people, it's not going to happen. It's not going to work. And so living in this world and dealing with stress and anxiety and being a young adult and being a person in this world right now, it's so draining. And our cups can be found empty so often. And I think in this time and in this day and age, we need to make sure that we are not left with no pursuit, that we need to be making sure that we are filling ourselves up. It can be exhausting. I don't want to doubt God. I know you guys don't want to doubt God. But there are so many times where we can doubt God because we are so fragile and such a shell of what we could be when we choose to fill ourselves with God's heart and the things that God has for us. And so in talking about this and in thinking about this, I was brainstorming what I wanted to talk about. And this is something that I think is so important and something that's so awesome to talk about. Pastor Rob and I were brainstorming, and there's this story of Elijah that came to us. And it just shows such a perfect depiction of God giving Elijah what he needed when he needed it. And I just wanted to share that story with you. So it's in 1 Kings, it's chapter 19. We're not going to, if you have Bibles, I'd love for you guys to open it there. I'm going to give some context first. Bear with me. It's a fun story. It's a little long, but I'm going to go do my best to cover all of it before we get into what we're actually reading, right? And so, context. We're in 1 Kings, right? We're in a section of Israel where it's two separate sections, right? There's a northern section and a southern section of Israel. So there's Israel on top and Judah on the bottom, right? And so there were a handful of kings and queens that ruled each side. Not very many of them were good. Most of them were just kind of evil and didn't really have God's heart within their kingdoms, and they didn't rule with God's heart, right? So mostly what that means is there was idol worship. Baal is like is the one that we're going to talk about, and it was a super popular idol at that time that people loved to worship. And so at this time, we're highlighting, in 1 Kings right here, we're highlighting the rule of Ahab and Jezebel, which are some of the most evil rulers in this northern kingdom in Israel, like specifically in like the Samaria area. God had tasked Elijah to go to this kingdom, right? To go to this place where Ahab and Jezebel ruled. And he asked Elijah to reveal God to them. He's like, I want you to go to this kingdom. I want you to show them who the Lord is, and hopefully I want them to turn from their wicked ways. I want them to turn from their idol worship. And so Elijah promised them that they had been in this super, super crazy drought, right? They had hardly any crops. They were super down horrendous with no water. And so God promised them, hey, I will send rain to you guys. Turn away from your sin, turn away from your idol worship. I will give you guys rain, right? And so Elijah's way of doing that, and the Lord asked Elijah to prove that the Lord was God, right? And so he challenges Ahab, right? He challenges Ahab and the prophets of Baal, right? There's hundreds of prophets that are supposed to be prophesying about this false god, right? And so he challenges them to an altar off. That's what I'm going to call it, an altar off, right? So they go up on top of this mountain called Mount Carmel, and they set up two altars, right? So there's one altar that's for the people of Baal, and then there's one altar that's for God, right? So there's hundreds of people around this altar of Baal, right? These guys that are setting up wood and chopping up a bull and putting it on top, and they're praying and praying and praying, right? And Elijah, being the man of God that he is, allows them to go first, right? So he's like, I want you guys to pray first. This will be great. I can't wait to see this. So he tells them to go first. There's, again, I think it's over 400 dudes literally praying to this God who is supposed to light this altar on fire and prove that he's the true, real God, okay? Newsflash, it doesn't happen. So 400 of them are sitting there cutting themselves, gushing blood, as with their customs, to try to get this God to light the altar on fire. And for more than half of the day, so from early in the morning to past noon, these guys are all sitting there praying and praying and praying, and nothing is happening, right? And so eventually it's Elijah's turn, and he goes, you know what, I don't think the altar's enough. I'm going to surround the altar in a trench full of water, and then I want you guys to pour water on top of the altar, so that way we can know that there's no way that I'm lighting this on fire, right? God, the only way that this is lighting on fire is by supernatural forces. It's the only way that it's going to happen, right? And so, as our God does, he comes through for Elijah. He lights the altar on fire after Elijah prays. One dude versus 400 dudes praying, and he lights it on fire, and it's engulfed completely, right? There's this cool line where it talks about the fire licking up the water out of the trench. And it's such a cool picture of just God's power and his way that he just comes through for people that are dedicated, for people that are passionate for him, people that are praying, right? And so once the job was done, Elijah sends King Ahab to the top, the very peak of the mountain, and he's like, okay, go look down on your city, have some water, eat some food. You're going to start to see a storm. You're going to be greeted with a storm on the way down there, right? And so Ahab starts to go down the mountain, and there's another little cool part at the end where Elijah beats him to the kingdom. It's just another way of God flexing on people and being like, yeah, Elijah ran faster than Ahab, which is pretty cool. He just gave Elijah super speed, and he runs past Ahab, even though he went first. Makes no sense. But it's, again, just God showing his ultimate power in the most crazy, demonstrative ways that he could have, right? And so that's kind of where we pick up here in chapter 19, right? Ahab makes it to the kingdom, and he goes in to tell Jezebel. Important thing about Jezebel, she kind of runs the roost and wears the pants in the family. So Ahab's floored. He's like, oh my gosh, this guy Elijah, his God's real. Lit an altar on fire. It was crazy. Look, there's clouds. We're going to get rain. And then Jezebel's like, Elijah, head on a stick. I want him to die tomorrow. And then all of a sudden, Elijah's like, shoot, this didn't work out the way that I wanted it to work out. And so we pick up in verse 3, right? And so then he was afraid. And he arose and ran for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he asked that he might die, saying, it is enough now, Lord. Take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers. And so Elijah is not feeling great right now. He just did all this work. He put together this crazy altar for God. God struck it with fire. He's sending people this way. He literally slaughtered all the prophets of Baal in God's name because of what they had done. Like, God, I've done so much for you. And now Ahab makes it back to Jezebel, and I'm gonna die? Like, they want to kill me? I thought that this was gonna be different. I thought this kingdom was ours now. Elijah was alone. He left his servant. He quite literally went through so much that he asked God to kill him. He asked God to die. Like, how many of us have felt that way before? Where we ask for so much, where we do so much. We're like, God, like, I have been so faithful. I am doing so much. I'm trying so hard. I'm praying every day. I'm reading my Bible. I'm coming to church. The weight of this world can be suffocating. And it can crush us from the outside. And sometimes when we give and when we give and when we give and when we give, and then the outcome isn't what we want it to be, when God doesn't destroy the city for us, when God doesn't take away the rulers that we didn't seem to like too much, when God has a different plan, we're hard on ourselves. We want to give up. But what does God do in the face of doubt? What does God do for us in times where we're not strong enough to do it for ourselves? I'll tell you. Verse 5, and he lay down and slept under a broom tree. And behold, an angel touched him and said to him, arise and eat. And he looked, and behold, there was at his head a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate and drank and lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came again a second time and touched him and said, arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you. And he arose and ate and drank, and went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. I don't know about you guys. I've never eaten enough to go for 40 days and 40 nights straight. I've had a caniac combo once, or 14 times, but I don't think I could go 40 days and 40 nights, right? So God gave Elijah exactly what he needed, right? And sometimes that's as simple as like, hey, dude, I know you're tired, like, just take a nap. How many of you guys have gotten home from a long day and are like, I think I just need a nap and then I won't be this feisty? Maybe like a granola bar? Like, come on, eat just a little bit. You know who you are. Drink some water, please. So it's like, seriously, like God gives him something so simple, so little. And that's what he needed at that time. Elijah feels cut off. He's hurt. He's like, I did so much for you, God. But how does God answer in that frustration? Elijah's upset. Elijah's running away. He's like, you know what? God, I know you have a plan for me. I know that, but she's trying to kill me. I'm going this way. I'm going, like, I don't even care. I'm done. Here, sit under this tree, eat some food, go to bed. That's what you need right now. I know you're frustrated. I know you're tired. I know you're hurt. And I don't know, but if I were God, let's speculate for a minute, not even close. Speculate for a minute. You ungrateful child! Did you not see me light the altar on fire for you? Did you not see me come through for you in a way that was so big? Oh, but the outcome wasn't what you wanted. Oh, I'm sorry that I didn't destroy the city. I'm sorry that I have a plan that's better than anything you could think of. But no, God doesn't answer that way. God doesn't berate him. God doesn't say those things. He gives him what he needs. He says, you know what? I get it. You're upset. And I love you. Have some food and a nap. I wish people would say that to me more often. And so we keep going, and it just gets better and better. Verse 9. There he came to a cave, and he lodged in it. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here? He said, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. And he said, go out. God said, go out and stand on the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rock before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. and after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him that said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He said, "I've been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away." Elijah continues to run from God. He continues to run from his purpose. God has a plan for him. God reveals himself in these crazy, flashy earthquakes, fires, winds. He's knocking rocks off the side of the mountain. And then he reveals himself in a whisper. He's like, you know what? God's not in that. God's not in this. God's not in that. Okay, here's a whisper. Listen to my voice. Elijah's so bitter. He wanted God to come through in such a big way in Israel. He wanted God to break the city walls down. He wanted the northern nation to fall. And when it didn't happen, he ran and he was upset. God doesn't need to show his faithfulness in big, crazy, city-crumbling events. He doesn't need to show it like that. And as God reveals to Elijah here, his faithfulness can be shown in low whispers. His faithfulness can be shown in the smallest, mundane, little things. And even as God is so patient with Elijah, so patient, he again gives this fabricated response, not once, but twice. It reminds me of like a 12-year-old, like writing a letter to their parents, like, "I'm running away." Like they're thinking really hard of like what they're gonna say. Like, "I hate you, and you didn't give me enough cookies last night." It's just like, it's so silly. Like, you've seen what God has done. Why is this the option that you're taking? There's no reason for it. There's no reason to be speaking this way. And so in verse 15, "And the Lord said to him, 'Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Syria. And Jehu, the son of Nimshi, you shall anoint to be king over Israel. And Elisha, the son of Shaphat, and Abel-Meholah, you shall anoint to be prophet in your place. And the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael shall Jehu put to death. And the one who escapes the sword of Jehu shall Elisha put to death. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him.'" God, finally, again, is just asking Elijah in all of his stubbornness. He's like, "You know what? I know you're mad, but guess what? You have a mission. I know you're upset. I know you're frustrated. I gave you rest. I gave you food. But it's time now. This is your journey. This is your mission. This is what you have next. This is what I had for you in the first place." And so my first point in all of this is just such an incredible story, but my first point in all of this is that we need to let God fill us. We look at the life of Elijah right here and the mistakes that he's making. It's so easy to stand on the outside and be like, "Elijah, you're being ridiculous, dude." But we can't. We need to let God fill us up. We need to let God fill us up. This passage is so powerful. And in all of it, he's so willing to see Elijah to the end. Elijah's discouraged. This win on Mount Carmel, I'm saying it again and again because it's so important. He's so discouraged. He is so upset with God. He wanted to see Jezebel and Ahab be gone and over and out of the picture. And so there's this whisper and there's this drive from God to lead him in a certain direction. And what does Elijah do? He ignores it. He runs the opposite direction. He doesn't trust the God that has been so faithful to him. God doesn't always work in the ways that we want him to work, and not in the way that Elijah wanted him to work. But Elijah needed to be attentive to that low whisper. Elijah needed to be attentive to that voice. And sometimes the outward displays of God's righteousness, of God's glory, of God's power don't come in fire, don't come in anger, don't come in earthquakes. I guarantee you, your prayers that you're asking for right now, today, God's not going to strike you with lightning to show you that those prayers are going to come true. I mean, hey, I'm not God, so I hope you don't get struck by lightning. But there's a high possibility that that's not the way that God's going to reveal himself to you. For your sake, I hope it's not. That would be really atrocious. That low voice can be so distant. That low voice can be pushed away. That low voice can be ran away from. Elijah drowned that voice out. And so my question for you is, what are the things that are drowning out that voice in your life? What are the things, what are the social media platforms? What are the things that are shouting at you from your phone? What are the insecurities that muffle these low whispers of God's voice? What are the things that you hold on to, that you try to throw in your cup to be like, you know what, this is what I can hold on to this and I'll be fine. Because there's a endless flowing fountain of God, an endless flowing fountain of love and acceptance and a plan for you. That the minute you start trying to throw these distractions in your glass, it's not going to work out. They're not going to sustain you. They're going to pass away. You need to put your cup up to that faucet that never stops, that faucet that keeps on pouring out. Because one day we're going to pull that cup away and we're going to look down and we're going to go, why is this cup not full? Examine that. We're surprised to take a drink and there's nothing in there. What have you been filling your cup with? Are you filling your cup with Instagram followers? Are you filling your cup with insecurity? When God becomes the voice, when God becomes the faucet of our lives, we can pull that cup closer. We can pull that cup, we put it up to that fountain and it doesn't stop. It's plentiful, it keeps going. We can continue to serve our purpose and continue to pour. And so point number 2 is that we can't be filled in isolation. We can't be filled in isolation. Elijah views himself here as so alone. And he even goes as far as saying that, like, he is the only one serving God. He's like, I'm the only one out here. I'm the only one out here right now that would do these things for you, God. And this is how you treat me? This is how you're going to treat the kingdom that I wanted so badly to crumble? In verse 3, he literally leaves his servant. Like the guy that's like supposed to be helping him out and hanging out with him. He just leaves him. Like, I don't even want to be with him. He separates himself. And this loneliness is blamed on God. When God assures him that there are people, when God assures him, I have 7,000 to Baal. Verse 18, I have 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, every mouth that has not kissed him. There are people for you, Elijah. There are people for you. And Elijah felt like this perceived failure that he had was meant to make him suffer. And that's not how God intended it. God did not intend him to suffer. This feeling carried Elijah so far away from God, that he'd stopped fighting for the cause that he needed, and he thought that he deserved to be treated better. He had convinced himself that this was God's plan when it really wasn't, when he wasn't listening to God's voice. God assures Elijah that he's not alone. Your circumstances can make your purpose a little bit blurry when you decide to separate yourself from what you need, when you decide to separate yourself from the people that ground you to what you believe. Elijah, his view got blurry when he decided to back away from what he wanted. I can't read that Bible right now. When I back away from the things that I need to tether me to what I'm doing, it's purposeless. And I think it's easy to look at Elijah and be like, you know what, dude, Elijah, you're being silly. You're being ridiculous. Like, of course you need people. Of course you do. But how often are we choosing to believe the same lies that Elijah did? How often are we choosing something else over the God that has a plan for us? It is our duty to love and to serve each other. We can't fill each other up in isolation. We can't fill each other up when we're separated from each other, when we're separated from God. Those are relationships that we need. And not only can we not be filled by others, not only can our own cup not be filled by others, not be filled by God, but we don't have the opportunity to serve our purpose and fill others. I can't be filled, you can't be filled. It's like, it's the worst thing you can do. And the amount of times that I have needed so desperately to have conversations with people about my day. Anybody that knows me well enough knows that I wear it on my face. When I have something I need to talk about, I try my best to talk about it. The amount of times I've knocked on Sierra's door because I need to talk about something. The amount of times my junior high counselors have gotten an earful because Cole's had a bad day. It's helpful. We can listen to each other's problems. We can struggle together because that's what we're meant to do. We're meant to do that together. Isolation is exactly what the enemy wants from us. Isolation is exactly what he wants to cut you off, to suffocate you in your sin, to suffocate you in the things that are only going to drag you away from God. And one day, you're going to look down at your cup, you're going to look at its emptiness, and your hesitation to get it anywhere near the faucet is what's going to kill you. Your hesitation to want to stick that hand out and be filled with people, with God, it's going to be your downfall. Don't be hesitant. People are here. We are here to live this life together. It is so hard, but we are here to live it together, to love together. There's a God that loves all of us the same, and we're called to love each other the same way that he's loved us. You can't fill your cup up in isolation. And thirdly, and most importantly, we are filled up with an intention of a mission. We are filled up with a mission. So, I don't want my message to get misunderstood, and I think that in a 21st century, in a day and age where there's so much like, oh, self-care, you do you, girl, like, kind of like focus on yourself, don't like block out the haters, like all that stuff. I don't want that to be what this is about, because that is a perception of it, and sometimes you feel like you're being selfish and you're too self-absorbed in your own self, right? And that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there's an element of it that's part of the process. There's a part of that process where we need to make sure that everything's good on the home front before we can go out, before we can start filling others, and before we can start fulfilling the mission that God has for us. And when it's coupled with pouring into ourselves and pouring into others, that's when it works the best, right? In the same way, a car with a full tank of gas that remains motionless is literally pointless. The gas is a waste. Don't fill yourself and fill yourself and fill yourself and then sit over here and not use that full cup to pour into others. If we are accepting fullness from a God that does not stop, from a God that does not stop filling us, your cup will never be empty if you pour out. If you continue to pour out, your cup will never be empty. And when we obey God and when we let him fill us, our engines are constantly running on a tank of gas that won't run out. That highway in Utah would have had nothing on me. We're constantly running on gas that won't run out. How can we expect to see a change in the world, to see a change in our own community, in our own young adults community, if we're running on a quarter tank of gas fueled on things that are just passing away? If you throw in a quarter tank of water into your gas tank, first of all, it's not going to start. Second of all, if it starts, there's not going to run for very long. If we're filling our tanks with things that are passing away and we're filled up just enough to roll out of bed and come to a Tuesday night, just enough to roll out of bed and come to a Sunday morning, and we're trying to pour all of that out, it's not sustainable. The simple answer is we can't do it. But when we fill our cups with everything that God has for us, with the love that we find in this book, with the Son that died for us, when we fill it with that truth, there's nothing that can stop us. Nothing that can stop this group of people right here, today, tomorrow, 3 weeks from now, from loving each other and from loving God so much that we can continue to pour into each other, continue to be filled by God, continue to expand our group, to continue to love Huntington Beach. And that's what we need right now. We need that ability to fill each other up and to be filled by people. We need the ability to accept the love that we deserve from God, to accept the love that each and every single one of you deserve from everyone here. It is so easy to feel unloved in this day and age. It is so easy to feel like nobody cares about you. I promise you, there is a God in heaven that cares about you so much that he sent his Son to die for you. Perfect life on earth. And then he died on a cross so that you could stand here today and be saved. And loved by the people in this room, loved by the people that claim the life of Christianity. That's everything. And so we need to make sure that we are filled up and filling each other up. This past weekend, I had the super cool opportunity to coach in a wrestling tournament. I wrestled in high school, for those of you that don't know. And it was honestly really fun. I haven't got to be in the room as much because I'm usually here, like leading worship and stuff. But it was super cool to be able to go to this tournament and to see, a lot of the kids that I've, seen when they were freshmen in high school be seniors now. And my little brother was on the wrestling team, and he was a freshman, and he sucked. But now he is the best wrestler on the team. He's the varsity team captain, and I get to watch him go kick kids' butts all weekend. And it's honestly like super awesome, and it's very fulfilling. It's a lot of fun. And so I got asked to coach at a tournament this last weekend. It was a varsity tournament. The team's really young, not a lot of great kids on the team. And so we're like about halfway through the day. It's a tournament bracket where it's double elimination, right? So you lose twice, you're out. That's it. Like, that's all she wrote. So one of our boys, his name was Devlin. Weird name, I know. I met him for the first time on Saturday. Devlin, cool, whatever. Sweetest kid in the world, nicest kid. Like, I didn't have to know him for him to just be like cool with me, and like we were dapping each other up, and it was great. And we're like halfway through the day. He had taken his first match, and he had lost, right? He's a freshman. He has never wrestled in a varsity tournament. It's the second tournament he's ever wrestled in his life, and he's already wrestling at varsity because he just has a free spot at his weight class. It's super awesome. He loses his first match. Super proud of him. Did a great job. He gets in line for his second match, and I can see the look on his face. He's nervous. He cried after he lost his first match, and so I was like, I know what kind of day this is going to be for you. I'm excited to see how this builds you a little bit. And so he gets in there. He starts wrestling, and he's doing great the whole time. Super proud of him. Doesn't get pinned. If you get pinned, you lose automatically. You just don't just lose by points. I could explain wrestling to you, but I could be up here for another 50 minutes doing that. So we get to the final period. There's 3 periods, 2 minutes each. We get to the final period, right? And he has an opportunity to score 1 point super easily, right? You get on bottom position. There's a guy on top position. If he stands up and breaks contact, he gets 1 point, right? He's down 4. So I'm like, hey, I look at him. He stands up after the second period. He's tired. I can tell he's gassed. I can tell he's over it. And I look at him. I go, Devlin, it's the 3rd period. You got 2 minutes. You're down 4. I want you to give me every single ounce of energy that you have left in your body right now. It's like, I know you're hurting. I know you're tired. I get it. Every single ounce of energy you have, I want to see it right now. Leave it out there. It's like, this could be your last match. If you lose, it's your last match. Every single piece you have left, I want it right now. So he nods at me. He gets down in bottom position. Lo and behold, kid stands up in 15 seconds. And I'm like, dude, okay, cool. So you can stand up. I just watched you get beat up for 4 minutes, but it's cool. So he stands up, breaks contact, gets a point. Not only does he do that, but then he takes the kid down again and gets 2 more points, right? And so he's going. The look on his face was really funny. I couldn't laugh in the moment, but you could tell he was exhausting himself. Every piece of that kid was left on the mat right then and there, right? And so he ended up losing by 1 point. He only scored 3. And I was so proud of him. I was like, dude, you did exactly what I asked you. I pulled him aside, and I was like giving him pointers, like, hey, you should work on this. Hey, maybe work on this. But you did great. I'm so proud of you. It's your first time. You're a freshman. You almost beat a varsity kid. That's awesome. And he's holding tears back, and he's kind of like, okay, yeah, and it just listening to what I'm saying. And I think he walked out of that gym prouder than he walked into it, and that was the coolest part for me, to just see him. He won to me in that moment, right? And Devin gave every single piece of energy that he had left in him. I told him the second that he was there, he surprised himself, he surprised me, and I thought it was the coolest thing. When we dedicate ourselves to a life of properly being filled up, when we dedicate ourselves to a life where we are allowing God to work in us and to have a life oriented towards pouring people out, that is our mission. That creates a mission for us that is so much bigger than anything else. And what's so important, what's so crazy about that is that Devlin didn't even win his match. He gave everything, and he still didn't get what he wanted. He gave every single piece of himself and still didn't get exactly what he wanted. Elijah, still frustrated. We finish here in verse 18. He's still frustrated. He doesn't have some big sorry and you know what, God, you're right. My bad. I was being stupid. That's on me. You're right. I need to just do what I'm told. No, Elijah's frustrated still. And God tells him, I gave you rest. I gave you what you needed. Now go. You have a mission to do. And so what I saw in Devlin is something that I want all of us to have. Sometimes things don't work out. Sometimes we're not given rest. Sometimes we are given rest. Sometimes God doesn't do the things that we want him to do in the ways that we want him to do it. But he has a purpose, and he has a reason for the things that he does. And I hope that we would be people just like Devlin, that we would fill ourselves up with everything that God has for us, that we would fill ourselves up with the love and the care, the affection of a father, and the love, the care, affection of people around us, people in this group, and that we would give every single piece of ourselves to each other, to our mission, to whatever God has called you to. It's different for everyone. Whatever God has called us to, He fills us up. He's this never-ending faucet that continues to fill us up over and over and over and over and over again. And no matter how flashy it is, no matter how big and crazy and fire and lightning and altar burning and slaughtering people, no matter how crazy it is, God comes through. It might not be in the way that you want it to be, but God comes through for us. And we get to do it. We should do it because God has asked us to do it, but we have an opportunity to serve him and do that. We have an opportunity because it's our purpose. It's why we were put here. We have to be so intentional about inventory and making sure that we are full, making sure that we have our purpose, making sure that we are full in order that we may pour out properly into others, that we may pour properly into our communities, into the people around us.